What's up, JC Kids Online? Welcome back to our third lesson in our summer vacation celebration. If you don't know me, my name is David. I lead our JC Kids team here, and I wanted you to know we are so excited for what we're going to learn today, and we're so happy that you're with us. We're so happy that you've tuned in to watch this episode. Today, we have a brand new super main point. Let's check it out. Today's super main point is that God is looking for a teammate. God is looking for a teammate. I want you to say that with me. Are you ready? All right. God is looking for a teammate. We're going to hear a story about somebody who was one of God's teammates who worked to serve God here on earth. And we're actually going to read a verse that tells us a little bit about his story. It's 1 Samuel 17, verse 46. In 1 Samuel 17:46, it says, David answered, "You come at me with sword and spear and battle axe. I come at you in the name of the God-of-the-Angel-Armies." Well, one of my favorite things that happens every summer, one of the things I celebrate every summer vacation is baseball season. I love baseball. It's one of my favorite sports. I love going to baseball games and feeling the warm summer breeze and eating hot dogs and watching baseball games, even on TV. I love baseball. Maybe you play baseball or softball, but we love baseball. It's one of my favorite things about the summer. Now, if you play baseball or if you've ever watched baseball, one of the things that you know is it's not like one person versus one person. Like in tennis, it's one person and they're playing another person, or maybe it's one or two people playing two other people. But in baseball, there's 9 different people that play at one time, and there's a batter. And one of the important things about baseball is that all of the people on the field do their job. They do whatever it is they're supposed to do. The pitcher is the person who throws the ball. The catcher sits behind the plate and catches it from the pitcher. You've got people in the outfield, people who play on the bases, and it's important that each one of those people does whatever they are supposed to do so that the baseball team can win. Our Bible story today is the story of David and Goliath, and maybe you've heard it. Goliath was a big, mean giant who hated God's people, and he was really mean to them. He made fun of them. He even killed some of them. Goliath was scary. And what's interesting is God could have come down and grabbed Goliath by his beard and beat him up and said, "You're not gonna do this anymore." But God didn't. God needed a teammate. God chose a teammate. God had a partnership with the army and the people of Israel. And what God did was God said, "Hey, I'm looking for a teammate. Now I'll help them. I'll make sure that they have all they need to beat this giant. But I'm looking for a teammate. I'm looking for somebody to be on my team." And God found David. Now, David wasn't a soldier. His brothers were, but David was just a shepherd. David watched sheep. And God found David. And God saw David's heart, that David was brave, and that David loved God. And God said, "That's the teammate I'm looking for." Well, David was sent by his father to see his brothers who were fighting against the armies of the Philistines and were scared of Goliath. And David asked, "Why are you so scared of this giant? Who is he to defy God and his armies?" David was brave, and David trusted God and knew that God would help him. So David went and got 5 stones from a little river, and he put them in a pouch, and he had a sling, and he walked out and he went up to Goliath. And maybe you know the story. What happened was David took a stone in his sling and he threw it at Goliath. He hit Goliath right in the middle of the head, and that big, mean giant fell to the ground. And David won. David won the victory that day because David trusted God. Now, the first thing we need to know in our life is, well, God is looking for a teammate, but it's not so that we can do things on our own. It's because God wants to help us. Now, there's stuff that God wants to do for us in our lives, and there's stuff that God will do for us in our life. But it's not just that God comes down and does it for us. God wants to be our teammate, which means God wants to work with us. The Bible tells us so many examples about God working in people's lives and doing amazing things. But what first had to happen was they had to be willing to trust God, or willing to ask God. They had to pray and seek God. It's us being willing to let God do what He wants to do in our lives. It's us saying, God, I can't do this by myself. I need you. And that's when God does things in our lives that are so amazing. It's just like a baseball team. Now, one person can't play every position. Even if they were the best baseball player in the world, one baseball player couldn't beat a whole team. And just like that, on our own, we can't do all the things that God wants us to do. It takes us doing our part. It takes us showing up, but it takes us trusting God to do His part, to be our teammate and for us to be His. David had to show up to the valley to fight Goliath. He had to go get the stones. He had to bring his sling, but it was ultimately God that brought David the victory that day. It was God being David's teammate and David being God's. David had to do the things that David did. He had to show up. It was God who brought the victory. Them together when something amazing happened. You can know that if you're on God's team, you're not going to lose. And David knew that. Now David knew that God wasn't just going to come down and do it all by himself, that He was looking for a teammate, but David trusted God. And David showed up and did his part. Goliath tried to scare David. He tried to say mean and scary things so that David would doubt God and that David would think that he couldn't do it, but David trusted God. David knew that if he was on God's team, he could do anything. And so David took his sling and he took the stone and he ran at Goliath and he threw it and he defeated a giant because he was on God's team, because he was God's teammate. And in our lives today, God is looking for a teammate. When you have God on your team and He tells you to do something, you are going to win. God never asks you to do something that you can't do. And if you do it, He will do His part. David did his part, and God did His. And how many of us want to be on God's team? I know I do. I know that I want to be God's teammate. You should too, because God is looking for a teammate. Well, thanks so much for checking out this episode of JC Kids Online. Before you go, make sure to check out the links in our description. We've got our series song for our summer vacation celebration. We've got a family discussion sheet so that you and your family can talk about this story, the story of David, and there's some fun activities in it to help us remember this lesson that we have a teammate in God who loves us. Well, that's all for me today. Whether you're joining us here in person, online, wherever you're joining us from, we want you to know that we love you, that we're praying for you, and we hope to see you soon.